Drinking coffee or water?
Water. I'm, I'm so over caffeinated right now. Do you want some caffeine?
I mean, sure.
There's a nitro drink.
This supposed to keep you up till tomorrow afternoon, basically.
Yeah. I don't have.
So what is nitro? It's just got a lot of caffeine.
Don't ask questions. It's called nitro. Do you need to know anything else?
It's got nitrogen in it. That's ridiculous. I mean, what we breathe is 78% nitrogen anyway. What do you need to add more for? Most people think that they're breathing oxygen, and they're actually breathing 78% nitrogen. You need like a milk bar, like from like from Clockwork Orange.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that top 3 Kubrick film for you?
Clockwork Orange, it's pretty good. I mean, it's demented. Jarring, I'd say.
Okay. Okay. So first, let's step back and big congrats on getting Neuralink implanted into a human. That's a historic step for Neuralink. And
Thanks. Yeah.
There's many more to come.
Yeah, we just obviously have our second implant as well.
How did that go?
So far, so good. There looks like we've got I think on the order of 400 electrodes that are providing signals. So
Nice.
yeah.
How quickly do you think the number of human participants will scale?
It depends somewhat on the regulatory approval, the rate at which we get regulatory approvals. So we're hoping to do 10 by the end of this year, total of 10, so 8 more.
And with each one, you're going to be learning a lot of lessons about the neurobiology of the brain, the everything, the whole chain of the Neuralink, the decoding, the signal processing, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's obviously going to get better with each one. I mean, I don't want to jinx it, but it seems to have gone extremely well with the second implant. So there's a lot of signal, a lot of electrodes. It's working very well.
What improvements do you think we'll see in Neuralink in the coming, let's get crazy, the coming years?
I mean, in years, it's going to be gigantic because we'll increase the number of electrodes dramatically. We'll improve the signal processing. So, we even with only roughly 10-15% of the electrodes working with Nolan, with our first patient, we were able to get to achieve a bits per second. That's twice the world record. So I think we'll start like vastly exceeding the world record by orders of magnitude in the years to come. So start getting to 100 bits per second, 1,000. Maybe if you say like 5 years from now, we might be at a megabit. Like faster than any human could possibly communicate by typing or speaking.
Yeah, that BPS is an interesting metric to measure. There might be a big leap in the experience once you reach a certain level of BPS.
Yeah.
Like entire new ways of interacting with the computer might be unlocked.
And with humans.
With other humans.
Provided they have they want a Neuralink too.
Right.
Otherwise they won't be able to absorb the signals fast enough.
Do you think they'll improve the quality of intellectual discourse?
Well, I think you could think of it, if you were to slow down communication, how do you feel about that? If you'd only talk at, let's say, 1/10 of normal speed, you'd be like, wow, that's agonizingly slow.
Yeah.
So now, imagine you could communicate clearly at 10 or 100 or 1,000 times faster than normal.
Listen, I'm pretty sure nobody in their right mind listens to me at 1x. They listen at 2x. So I can only imagine what 10x would feel like, or I could actually understand it.
I usually default to 1.5x. You can do 2x, but actually, if I'm trying to if I'm listening to somebody go to in like sort of 15-20 minute segments to go to sleep, then I'll do it 1.5x. If I'm paying attention, I'll do 2x.
Right.
But actually, if you start listen to podcasts or sort of audiobooks or anything if you get used to doing it at 1.5, then 1 sounds painfully slow.
I'm still holding on to one because I'm afraid. I'm afraid of myself becoming bored with the reality, with the real world where everyone's speaking in 1x.
Well, it depends on the person. You can speak very fast. Like we can communicate very quickly, and also if you use a wide range of, if your vocabulary is larger, your effective bit rate is higher.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
The effective bit rate. I mean, that is the question: is how much information is actually compressed in the low bit transfer of language.
Yeah. If there's a single word that is able to convey something that would normally require 10 simple words, then you've got maybe a 10x compression on your hands. And that's really like with memes. Memes are like data compression. It conveys a whole. You're simultaneously hit with a wide range of symbols that you can interpret, and it's you kind of get it faster than if it were words or a simple picture.
And of course, you're referring to memes broadly, like ideas.
Yeah, there's an entire idea structure that is like an idea template, and then you can add something to that idea template, but somebody has that pre-existing idea template in their head. So when you add that incremental bit of information, you're conveying much more than if you just said a few words. It's everything associated with that meme.
You think there'll be emergent leaps of capability as you scale the number of electrodes? Like
Yeah.
there'll be a certain... Do you think there'll be like actual number where it just... The human experience will be altered?
Yeah.
What do you think that number might be? Whether electrodes or BPS? We of course don't know for sure, but is this 10,000,
Well,
100,000?
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you're anywhere at 10,000 bits per second, I mean, that's vastly faster than any human can communicate right now. If you think of what is the average bits per second of a human, it is less than 1 bit per second over the course of a day, because there are 86,400 seconds in a day, and you don't communicate 86,400 tokens in a day. Therefore, your bits per second is less than 1, average over 24 hours. It's quite slow. And now even if you're communicating very quickly, and you're talking to somebody who understands what you're saying, because in order to communicate, you have to, at least to some degree, model the mind state of the person to whom you're speaking. Then take the concept you're trying to convey, compress that into a small number of syllables, speak them, and hope that the other person decompresses them into a conceptual structure that is as close to what you have in your mind as possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of signal loss there in that process.
Yeah, very lossy compression and decompression, and a lot of what your neurons are doing is distilling the concepts down to a small number of symbols, of say syllables that I'm speaking, or keystrokes, whatever the case may be. So that's a lot of what your brain computation is doing. Now, there is an argument that that's actually a healthy thing to do or a helpful thing to do, because as you try to compress complex concepts, you're perhaps forced to distill what is most essential in those concepts, as opposed to just all the fluff. So in the process of compression, you distill things down to what matters the most, because you can only say a few things. So that is perhaps helpful. I think we'll probably get, if our data rate increases, it's highly probable that we'll become far more verbose. Just like your computer, when computers had my first computer had 8K of RAM, so you really thought about every byte. And now you got computers with many gigabytes of RAM. So if you want to do an iPhone app that just says hello world, it's probably, I don't know, several megabytes minimum with a bunch of fluff. But nonetheless, we still prefer to have the computer with the more memory and more compute. So the long-term aspiration of Neuralink is to improve the AI-human symbiosis by increasing the bandwidth of the communication. Because even if in the most benign scenario of AI, you have to consider that the AI is simply going to get bored waiting for you to spit out a few words. I mean, if the AI can communicate at terabits per second and you're communicating at bits per second. Yeah, it's like talking to a tree.
Well, it is a very interesting question for a super intelligent species. What use are humans?
I think there is some argument for humans as a source of will.
Will.
Will, yeah, source of will or purpose. So if you consider the human mind as being essentially there's the primitive limbic elements, which basically even like reptiles have, and there's the cortex, the thinking and planning part of the brain. Now the cortex is much smarter than the limbic system, and yet is largely in service to the limbic system, trying to make the limbic system happy. I mean, the sheer amount of compute that's gone into people trying to get laid is insane. Without actually seeking procreation, they're just literally trying to do this sort of simple motion, and they get a kick out of it.
Yeah.
So this simple, which in the abstract rather absurd motion, which is sex, the cortex is putting a massive amount of compute into trying to figure out how to do that.
So like 90% of distributed compute of the human species is spent on trying to get laid, probably. Like
A massive
large
amount
percentage.
is, yeah. There's no purpose to most sex except hedonistic. It's just sort of joy or whatever, dopamine release. Now, once in a while it's procreation, but for humans, modern humans, it's mostly recreation. So your cortex, much smarter than your limbic system, is trying to make the limbic system happy because the limbic system wants to have sex. So, or wants some tasty food or whatever the case may be. And then that is then further augmented by the tertiary system, which is your phone, your laptop, iPad, whatever, all your computing stuff. That's your tertiary layer. So you're actually already a cyborg. You have this tertiary compute layer, which is in the form of your computer with all the applications, all your compute devices. And so in the getting laid front, there's actually a massive amount of digital compute also trying to get laid. With like Tinder and whatever,
Yeah. So the compute that we humans have built is also participating.
Yeah. I mean, there's like gigawatts of compute going into getting laid, like of digital compute.
Yeah. What if AGI was...
This is happening as we speak.
If we merge with AI, it's just going to expand the compute that we humans use.
Pretty much.
To try to get laid.
It's one of the things, certainly, yeah.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that yes, like is there a use for humans? Well, there's this fundamental question of what's the meaning of life? Why do anything at all? And so if our simple limbic system provides a source of will to do something, that then goes to our cortex, that then goes to our tertiary compute layer, then I don't know, it might actually be that the AI in a benign scenario is simply trying to make the human limbic system happy.
Yeah, it seems like the will is not just about the limbic system. There's a lot of interesting, complicated things in there. We also want power.
That's limbic too, I think.
But then we also want to, in a kind of cooperative way, alleviate the suffering in the world.
Not everybody does, but yeah, sure. Some people do.
As a group of humans, when we get together, we start to have this kind of collective intelligence that is more complex in its will than the underlying individual descendants of apes, right? So there's like other motivations, and that could be a really interesting source of an objective function for AGI.
Yeah, I mean, there are these sort of fairly cerebral or kind of higher level goals. I mean, for me, it's like, what's the meaning of life? Or understanding the nature of the universe is of great interest to me, and hopefully to the AI. And that's the mission of XAI and Grok, is understand the universe.
So do you think people, when you have a neural link with 10,000, 100,000 channels, most of the use cases will be communication with AI systems?
Well, assuming that they're not, I mean, they're solving basic neurological issues that people have. If they've got damaged neurons in their spinal cord or neck, or as is the case with our first two patients, then this obviously the first order of business is solving fundamental neuron damage in the spinal cord, neck, or in the brain itself. So our second product is called Blindsight, which is to enable people who are completely blind, lost both eyes, or optic nerve, or just can't see at all, to be able to see by directly triggering the neurons in the visual cortex. So we're just starting at the basics here. This is like the simple stuff, relatively speaking, is solving neuron damage. It can also solve, I think, probably schizophrenia. If people have seizures of some kind, it can probably solve that. It could help with memory. There's like a kind of a tech tree, if you will, of like you got the basics. But like you need literacy before you can have Lord of the Rings.
Got it.
Do you have letters and alphabet? Okay, great. Words, then eventually you get sagas. So, I think there may be some things to worry about in the future, but the first several years are really just solving basic neurological damage. Like for people who have essentially complete or near complete loss from the brain to the body, like Stephen Hawking would be an example. The Neuralinks would be incredibly profound, because you can imagine if Stephen Hawking could communicate as fast as we're communicating, perhaps faster, and that's certainly possible, probable, in fact, likely, I'd say.
So there's a kind of dual track of medical and non-medical, meaning, so everything you've talked about could be applied to people who are non-disabled in the future.
The logical thing to do is, sensible thing to do is to start off solving basic neuron damage issues.
Yes.
Because there's obviously some risk with the new device. You can't get the risk down to zero. It's not possible. So you want to have the highest possible reward, given there's a certain irreducible risk. And if somebody's able to have a profound improvement in their communication, that's worth the risk.
As you get the risk down.
Yeah, as you get the risk down, and once the risk is down to if you have like thousands of people that have been using it for years, and the risk is minimal, then perhaps at that point you could consider saying, okay, let's aim for augmentation. Now I think we're actually going to aim for augmentation with people who have neuron damage. So we're not just aiming to give people a communication data rate equivalent to normal humans. We're aiming to give people who have, quadriplegic or maybe have complete loss of the connection to the brain and body, a communication data rate that exceeds normal humans. While we're in there, why not? Let's give people superpowers.
And the same for vision. As you restore vision, there could be aspects of that restoration that are superhuman.
Yeah, at first the vision restoration will be low res, because you have to say, like, how many neurons can you put in there and trigger, and you can do things where you adjust the electric field, so like even if you've got, say, 10,000 neurons, it's not just 10,000 pixels, because you can adjust the field between the neurons and do them in patterns in order to get, have say 10,000 electrodes effectively give you I don't know, maybe like having a megapixel or a 10 megapixel situation. And then over time, I think you get to higher resolution than human eyes, and you could also see in different wavelengths. So like Geordie LaForge from Star Trek, had like the thing. You could just, like, do you want to see in radar? No problem. You can see ultraviolet, infrared, eagle vision, whatever you want.
Do you think there'll be, let me ask a Joe Rogan question. Do you think there'll be, I just recently taken ayahuasca.
Is that a
So this
rhetorical
question? No. Well, yes.
Well, I guess technically it is.
Yeah. Have
Yeah.
you
'cause
tried?
there's DMT
Ever
in
tried
there or
DMT,
something?
bro?
Right.
I love you, Joe.
That's
Okay. But either,
Yeah. Wait. Yeah. Have you said much about it? The
I have
ayahuasca
not.
stuff?
I have not. I've been.
Okay. Well, why don't you spill the beans?
It was a truly
Don't
incredible.
you turn the tables on you?
Wow.
I mean, you're in the jungle.
Yeah, amongst the trees, myself.
Yeah, it must have been crazy.
And the shaman. Yeah. With the insects, with the animals all around you, like the jungle as far as I can see.
I mean,
that's the way to do it.
things are gonna look pretty wild.
Yeah, pretty wild. I took
mean-
an extremely high dose.
Just don't go hugging an anaconda or something. You know?
You haven't lived unless you made love to an anaconda. I'm sorry. But
Snakes and ladders.
yeah, it was. I took extremely high dose of
Okay.
9 cups and
Damn. Okay, that sounds like a lot. Like, what's the normal? Is normal just 1 cup or?
1 or 2. Well, usually 1. Yeah.
You went.
Yeah.
Wait.
Yeah.
Like right off the bat, or did you work your way up to it?
So I
you just jumped in at the
across
deep end.
across 2 days because the first day I took 2 and
Okay.
it was a ride, but it wasn't quite like
It wasn't like a revelation.
it wasn't into deep space type of ride. It was
Yeah.
just like a little airplane ride. I saw some trees and some visuals and all that. I just saw a dragon and all that kind of stuff. But
At 9 cups, you went to Pluto, I think.
Pluto, yeah, no, deep space.
Deep space.
No, one of the interesting aspects of my experience is I thought I would have some demons, some stuff to work through.
That's what people.
That's what everyone says.
No one ever says. Yeah,
I
exactly.
had nothing. I had all positive. I had just so
just
full.
a pure soul.
I don't
Nice.
think so. I don't know. But I kept thinking about it. It had like extremely high resolution
Okay.
thoughts about the people I know in my life. You were there.
Okay.
It was and it's just not from my relationship with that person, but just as the person themselves, I had just this deep gratitude of who they are.
That's cool.
It was just like this exploration, like like Sims or whatever. You get to watch them.
Sure.
I got to watch people
Okay.
and just be in awe of how amazing they are.
It sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's great. I was waiting for
When's Steven coming?
Exactly. Maybe I'll have some negative thoughts. Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. I had just extreme gratitude for them, and then also a lot of space travel. You know,
Space travel to where?
So here's what it was. It was people, the human beings that I know. They had this kind of, well, the best way to can describe it is they had a glow to them.
Okay.
And then I kept flying out from them to see Earth, to see our solar system, to see our galaxy. And I saw that light, that glow all across the universe.
Okay.
Like that whatever that form is,
All right.
whatever that, like
Like, did you go past the Milky Way?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're like intergalactic.
Yeah, intergalactic.
Okay, dang.
Yeah. But always pointing in.
Okay.
Yeah. Past the Milky Way, I mean, I saw like a huge number of galaxies, intergalactic,
Oh, okay.
and all of it was glowing. So, but I couldn't control that travel because I would actually explore near distances to the solar system, see if there's aliens or any of that kind of
Sure.
stuff.
See
No,
aliens?
I didn't know. No,
Zero aliens?
implication of aliens because they were glowing. They were
Okay.
glowing in the same way that humans were glowing. That
Okay.
that like life force that I was seeing. The thing that made humans amazing was there throughout the universe. Like there was these
Okay.
glowing dots. So I don't know. It made me feel like there's life. No, not life, but something. Whatever makes humans amazing all throughout the universe.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it was amazing. No
Sounds
demons. No demons. I looked for the demons. There's no demons. There were dragons, and they're pretty awesome. So the
Okay.
thing about trees.
Was there anything scary at all?
Dragons, but they weren't
Yeah,
scary.
yeah.
They were they were
Sure.
protected. So the thing is,
Pop the magic dragon.
no, it was more like Game of Thrones kind of dragons. They weren't very friendly. They were very big. So the thing is about giant trees at night, which is where I was.
I mean, the jungle's kind of
scary.
Yeah.
The trees started to look like dragons, and they were all like looking at me,
Sure. Okay.
and it didn't seem scary. They seemed like they were protecting me. And they, the shaman and the people didn't speak any English, by the way, which made it even scarier.
Okay.
Because we're not even like, we're worlds apart in many ways. It just, but yeah, there was not. They talk about the of the forest protecting you, and that's what I felt like.
And you're way out in the jungle.
Way out. This is not like a tourist retreat.
Like 10 miles outside of Rio or something.
No, we went. No, this is not a.
You're
this is
deep,
not a
deep
standard.
Amazon.
But me and this guy named Paul Rosalie,
Yeah.
who basically is a Tarzan. He lives in the jungle. We went out deep, and we just went crazy.
Wow,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So anyway, can I get that same experience in a Neuralink?
Probably, yeah.
I guess that is the question for non-disabled people. Do you think that there's a lot in our perception, in our experience of the world that could be explored, that could be played with using Neuralink?
Yeah, I mean, Neuralink it's really a generalized input-output device. You know, it's reading electrical signals and generating electrical signals. And I mean, everything that you've ever experienced in your whole life, smell, you know, emotions, all of those are electrical signals. So it's kind of weird to think that your entire life experience is distilled down to electrical signals from neurons, but that is in fact the case. Or I mean, that's at least what all the evidence points to. So, I mean, you could trigger the right neuron. You could trigger a particular scent. You could certainly make things glow. I mean, do pretty much anything. I mean, really, you can think of the brain as a biological computer. So if there are certain, say, chips or elements of that biological computer that are broken, let's say your ability to, if you've got a stroke, if you've had a stroke, that means you've got some part of your brain is damaged. Let's say it's a speech generation or the ability to move your left hand, that's the kind of thing that a Neuralink could solve. If you've got like a massive amount of memory loss that's just gone, well, we can't get the memories back. We could restore your ability to make memories, but we can't, restore memories that are fully gone. Now I should say, if part of the memory is there, and the means of accessing the memory is the part that's broken, then we could re-enable the ability to access the memory. So, but you can think of like RAM in your computer. If the RAM is destroyed, or your SD card is destroyed, we can't get that back. But if the connection to the SD card is destroyed, we can fix that. If it is fixable physically, then it can be fixed.
Of course, with AI, you can, just like you can repair photographs and fill in missing parts of photographs. Maybe you can do the same.
You could say like create the most probable set of memories based on all information you have about that person. You could then it would be probabilistic restoration of memory. Now we're getting pretty esoteric here,
but that is one of the most beautiful aspects of the human experience, is remembering the good memories. Like we live most of our life, as Danny Kahneman has talked about, in our memories, not in the actual moment. We're collecting memories and we kind of relive them in our head, and that's the good times. If you just integrate over our entire life, it's remembering the good times.
Sure. That
produces the largest amount of happiness. And so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what are we but our memories, and what is death but the loss of memory? Loss of information. If you could say like, well, if you could you run a thought experiment, what if you were disintegrated painlessly and then reintegrated a moment later, like teleportation, I guess, provided there's no information loss. The fact that your one body was disintegrated is irrelevant.
And memories is just such a huge part of that.
Death is fundamentally the loss of information, the loss of memory.
So if we can store them as accurately as possible, we basically achieve a kind of immortality.
Yeah.
You've talked about the threats, the safety concerns of AI. Let's look at long-term visions. Do you think Neuralink is, in your view, the best current approach we have for AI safety?
It's an idea that may help with AI safety. Certainly not. I wouldn't want to claim it's like some panacea or something. That's a sure thing. But I mean, many years ago, I was thinking like, well, what would inhibit alignment of collective human will with artificial intelligence, and the low data rate of humans, especially our slow output rate, would necessarily, just because it's because the communication is so slow, would diminish the link between humans and computers. Like, the more you are a tree, the less you know what the tree is. Like, let's say you look at a tree, you look at this plant or whatever, and like, hey, I'd really like to make that plant happy, but it's not saying a lot, you know?
So the more we increase the data rate that humans can intake and output, then that means the better, the higher the chance we have in a world full of AGIs.
Yeah. We could better align collective human will with AI if the output rate especially was dramatically increased. Like, and I think there's potential to increase the output rate by, I don't know, 3, maybe 6, maybe more orders of magnitude. So it's better than the current situation.
And that output rate would be by increasing the number of electrodes, number of channels, and also maybe implanting multiple neural links.
Yeah.
Do you think there will be a world in the next couple of decades where it's hundreds of millions of people have neural links?
Yeah.
You think when they see the capabilities, the superhuman capabilities that are possible, and then the safety is demonstrated?
Yeah, if it's extremely safe, and you have and you can have superhuman abilities, and let's say you can upload your memories, you know, so you wouldn't lose memories, then I think probably a lot of people would choose to have it. It would supersede the cell phone, for example. I mean, it's the biggest problem that say a phone has is trying to figure out what you want. So that's why you've got you know, autocomplete, and you've got output, which is all the pixels on the screen. But from the perspective of the human, the output is so friggin' slow. Desktop or phone is desperately just trying to understand what you want. And you know, there's an eternity between every keystroke from a computer standpoint.
Yeah.
So
the computer's talking to a tree, a slow-moving tree that's trying to swipe.
Yeah. So, you know, if you had computers that are doing trillions of instructions per second, and a whole second went by, I mean, that's a trillion things it could have done, you know?
Yeah. I think it's exciting and scary for people, because once you have a very high bit rate, that changes the human experience in a way that's very hard to imagine. Yeah.
We would be something different. I mean, some sort of futuristic cyborg. I mean, we're obviously talking about, by the way, like, it's not like around the corner. It's, you ask me what the distant future is, like, maybe this is like, it's not super far away, but 10, 15 years, that kind of thing.
When can I get one? 10 years?
Probably less than 10 years. Depends what you want to do, you know.
Hey, if I can get like 1,000 BPS,
1,000 BPS,
and it's safe, and I can just interact with the computer while laying back and eating Cheetos. I don't eat Cheetos. There's certain aspects of human-computer interaction, when done more efficiently and more enjoyably, are like worth it.
Well, we feel pretty confident that I think maybe within the next year or two, that someone with a Neuralink implant will be able to outperform a pro gamer.
Nice.
Because the reaction time would be faster.
I got to visit Memphis.
Yeah.
You're going big on compute.
Yeah.
And you've also said play to win or don't play at all. So
yeah.
What does it take to win?
For AI, that means you've got to have the most powerful training compute. And the rate of improvement of training compute has to be faster than everyone else, or you will not win. Your AI will be worse.
So how can Grok, let's say 3, that might be available, like next year?
Well, hopefully end of this year.
Grok 3.
If we're lucky, yeah.
How can that be the best LLM, the best AI system available in the world? How much of it is compute? How much of it is data? How much of it is like post-training? How much of it is the product that you package it up in, all that kind of stuff.
I mean, they won't matter. It's sort of like saying what if, let's say it's a Formula One race, like what matters more, the car or the driver? I mean, they both matter. If your car is not fast, then if it's like, let's say it's half the horsepower of your competitors, the best driver will still lose. If it's twice the horsepower, then probably even a mediocre driver will still win. So the training computer is kind of like the engine. There's horsepower of the engine. So you want to try to do the best on that, and then so how efficiently do you use that training compute, and how efficiently do you do the inference, the use of the AI? So obviously that comes down to human talent, and then what unique access to data do you have? That's also plays a role.
You think Twitter data would be useful?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the leading AI companies have already scraped all the Twitter data. Not I think they have. So on a go forward basis, what's useful is the fact that it's up to the second.
Yes.
That's because it's hard for them to scrape in real time. So there's an immediacy advantage that Grok has already. I think with Tesla and the real-time video coming from several million cars, ultimately tens of millions of cars, with Optimus, there might be hundreds of millions of Optimus robots, maybe billions, learning a tremendous amount from the real world. That's the biggest source of data. I think ultimately is sort of Optimus. Probably Optimus is going to be the biggest source of data
because
reality scales. Reality scales to the scale of reality. It's actually humbling to see how little data humans have actually been able to accumulate. Really, if you say how many trillions of usable tokens have humans generated, where on a non-duplicative, like discounting spam and repetitive stuff, it's not a huge number. You run out pretty quickly.
And Optimus can go, so Tesla cars unfortunately have to stay on the road. Optimus robot can go anywhere. There's more reality off the road and go off road.
I mean, like the Optimus robot can like pick up the cup and see, did it pick up the cup in the right way? Did it, say pour water in the cup? Did the water go in the cup or not go in the cup? Did it spill water or not?
Yeah.
Simple stuff like that. I mean, but it can do that at scale times a billion. So generate useful data from reality. So cause and effect stuff.
What do you think it takes to get to mass production of humanoid robots like that?
It's the same as cars, really. I mean, global capacity for vehicles is about 100 million a year, and it could be higher. It's just that the demand is on the order of 100 million a year, and then there's roughly 2 billion vehicles that are in use in some way. So, which makes sense. Like the life of a vehicle is about 20 years. So at steady state, you can have 100 million vehicles produced a year with a 2 billion vehicle fleet, roughly. Now for humanoid robots, the utility is much greater. So my guess is humanoid robots are more like at a billion plus per year.
But until you came along and started building Optimus, it was thought to be an extremely difficult problem. I mean, it is an extremely difficult problem.
So walk in the park. I mean, Optimus currently would struggle to walk in the park. I mean, it can walk in a park, but park is not too difficult. But it will be able to walk over a wide range of terrain.
Yeah, and pick up objects.
Yeah. It can already do that.
But like all kinds of objects.
Yeah.
All foreign objects. I mean, pouring water in a cup is not trivial. Because then, if you don't know anything about the container, it could be all kinds of containers.
Yeah, there's going to be an immense amount of engineering just going into the hand.
Yeah.
The hand might be close to half of all the engineering in Optimus. From an electromechanical standpoint, the hand is probably roughly half of the engineering.
But so much of the intelligence of humans goes into what we do with our hands.
Yeah.
There's the manipulation of the world, manipulation of objects in the world. Intelligent, safe manipulation of objects in the world, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you start really thinking about your hand and how it works. You know,
I do all the time.
the sensory control homunculus is really object the monkey's hand.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like your hands, the actuators, the muscles of your hand are almost overwhelmingly in your forearm.
Mm-hmm.
So your forearm has the muscles that actually control your hand. There's a few small muscles in the hand itself, but your hand is really like a skeleton meat puppet, and with cables so the muscles that control your fingers are in your forearm, and they go through the carpal tunnel, which is that you've got a little collection of bones and a tiny tunnel that these cables, the tendons, go through, and those tendons are mostly what move your hands.
And something like those tendons has to be re-engineered into the Optimus and do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so like the current Optimus, we tried putting the actuators in the hand itself, but then you sort of end up having these like
giant hands.
Yeah, giant hands that look weird.
Yeah.
And then they don't actually have enough degrees of freedom or enough strength. So then you realize, oh, okay, that's why you got to put the actuators in the forearm, and just like a human, you got to run cables through a narrow tunnel to operate the fingers. And there's also a reason for not having all the fingers the same length. So it wouldn't be expensive from an energy or evolutionary standpoint to have all your fingers be the same length. So why aren't they the same length?
Yeah, why not?
Because it's actually better to have different lengths. Your dexterity is better if you've got fingers of different length. There are more things you can do, and your dexterity is actually better if your fingers are of different length. Like there's a reason we've got a little finger. Like why not have a little finger this bigger?
Yeah. Because
it allows you to do it helps you with fine motor skills.
This little finger helps?
It does. If you lost your little finger, you'd have noticeably less dexterity.
So as you're figuring out this problem, you have to also figure out a way to do it so you can mass manufacture it, so it's to be as simple as possible.
It's actually going to be quite complicated. The as possible part it's quite a high bar. If you want to have a humanoid robot that can do things that a human can do, it's a very high bar. So our new arm has 22 degrees of freedom instead of 11, and has the actuators in the forearm. And these all the actuators are designed from scratch. The physics first principles. The sensors are all designed from scratch, and we'll continue to put a tremendous amount of engineering effort into improving the hand. Like the hand, by hand I mean like the entire forearm from elbow forward. Mm-hmm. Is really the hand. So that's incredibly difficult engineering, actually. and so the simplest possible version of a humanoid robot that can do even most, perhaps not all, of what a human can do is actually still very complicated. It's not simple. It's very difficult.
Can you just speak to what it takes for a great engineering team? For you, what I saw in Memphis, the supercomputer cluster, is just this intense drive towards simplifying the process, understanding the process, constantly improving it, constantly iterating it.
Well, it's easy to say simplify it, and it's very difficult to do it. I have this very basic first principles algorithm that I run kind of as like a mantra, which is to first question the requirements, make the requirements less dumb. The requirements are always dumb to some degree. So if you want to start off by reducing the number of requirements, and no matter how smart the person is who gave you those requirements, they're still dumb to some degree. If you have to start there, because otherwise you could get the perfect answer to the wrong question. So try to make the question the least wrong possible. That's what questioning the requirements means. And then the second thing is try to delete whatever the step is, the part or the process step. Sounds very obvious, but people often forget to try deleting it entirely. And if you're not forced to put back at least 10% of what you delete, you're not deleting enough. And it's somewhat illogically, people often, most of the time, feel as though they've succeeded if they've not been forced to put things back in. But actually they haven't, because they've been overly conservative and have left things in there that shouldn't be. So And only the third thing is try to optimize it or simplify it. Again, these all sound, I think, very, very obvious when I say them, but the number of times I've made these mistakes is more than I care to remember. That's why I have this mantra. So, in fact, I'd say the most common mistake of smart engineers is to optimize a thing that should not exist.
So you, like you say, you run through the algorithm.
Yeah.
And basically show up to a problem, show up to the supercomputer cluster and see the process and ask, can this be deleted?
Yeah, first try to delete it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not easy to do.
No, and actually, there's what generally makes people uneasy is that you've got to delete at least some of the things that you delete, you will put back in.
Yeah.
But going back to sort of where our limbic system can steer us wrong is that we tend to remember with sometimes a jarring level of pain where we deleted something that we subsequently needed. And so people will remember that one time they forgot to put in this thing 3 years ago and that caused them trouble. And so they overcorrect and then they put too much stuff in there and overcomplicate things. So you actually have to say, no, we're deliberately going to delete more than we should. So that we're putting at least 1 in 10 things we're going to add back in.
And I've seen you suggest just that something should be deleted, and you can kind of see the pain.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Everybody feels a little bit of the pain.
Absolutely. And I tell them in advance, like, yeah, there's some of the things that we delete, we're going to put back in. And that people get a little shook by that. But it makes sense because if you're so conservative as to never have to put anything back in, you obviously have a lot of stuff that isn't needed. So you got to overcorrect. This is, I would say, like a cortical override to a limbic instinct.
One of many that probably leads us astray.
Yeah. There's like a step 4 as well, which is any given thing can be sped up. However fast you think it can be done, like whatever the speed is being done, it can be done faster. But you shouldn't speed things up until it's up, until you try to delete it and optimize it. Otherwise, you're speeding up something that shouldn't exist is absurd. And then the fifth thing is to automate it. Yeah. And I've gone backwards so many times where I've automated something, sped it up, simplified it, and then deleted it. And I got tired of doing that. So that's why I've got this mantra that is a very effective 5-step process. It works great.
Well, when you've already automated, deleting must be real painful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's great. It's like, wow, I really wasted a lot of effort there.
Yeah. I mean, what you've done with the cluster in Memphis is incredible. Just in a handful of weeks.
Yeah, it's not working yet, so I don't want to pop the champagne corks. In fact, I have a call in a few hours with the Memphis team because we're having some power fluctuation issues. So,
yes.
Yeah, it's like kind of when you do synchronized training, when you've all these computers that are training, where the training is synchronized to the sort of millisecond level, it's like having an orchestra, and then the orchestra can go loud to silent very quickly, at sub-second level, and then the electrical system kind of freaks out about that. Like if you suddenly see giant shifts 10-20 megawatts several times a second, this is not what electrical systems are expecting to see.
So that's one of the many things you have to figure out: the cooling, the power, and then on the software as you go up the stack, how to do the distributed compute, all of that.
Today's problem is dealing with extreme power jitter.
Power jitter.
Yeah.
There's a nice ring to that. So that's okay. And you stayed up late into the night, as you often do, there.
Last week, yeah.
Last week, yeah.
Yeah, we finally got training going at oddly enough roughly 4:20 a.m. Last Monday.
Total coincidence.
Yeah, I mean maybe it was 4:22 or something.
Yeah. It's that universe again with the jokes.
Exactly, just love it.
I mean, I wonder if you could speak to the fact that one of the things that you did when I was there is you went through all the steps of what everybody's doing just to get a sense that you yourself understand it, and everybody understands it, so they can understand when something is dumb or something is inefficient or that kind of stuff. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I try to do whatever the people at the front lines are doing. I try to do it at least a few times myself. So connecting fiber optic cables, diagnosing a faulty connection. That tends to be the limiting factor for large training clusters, is the cabling. There's so many cables. Because for a coherent training system where you've got RDMA, remote direct memory access, the whole thing is like one giant brain. So you've got any to any connection. So it's the any GPU can talk to any GPU out of 100,000. That is a crazy cable layout.
It looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's like the human brain, but like at a scale that humans can visibly see. It is a cool brain.
I mean, the human brain also has a massive amount of the brain tissue is the cables.
Yeah.
So they get the gray matter, which is the compute, and then the white matter, which is cables. A big percentage of your brain is just cables.
That's what it felt like walking around in the supercomputer center. It's like we're walking around inside the brain.
Yeah.
So we'll one day build a super intelligent system. Do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think there's a chance that XAI, that you are the one that builds AGI?
It's possible. What do you define as AGI?
I think humans will never acknowledge that AGI has been built.
Just keep moving the goalposts.
Yeah. So I think there's already superhuman capabilities that are available in AI systems. I think what AGI is when it's smarter than the collective intelligence of the entire human species.
Well, I think that generally people would call that sort of ASI, artificial superintelligence. But there are these thresholds where you say at some point the AI is smarter than any single human, and then you've got 8 billion humans. So and actually each human is machine augmented by the computers. So you've got it's a much higher bar to compete with 8 billion machine augmented humans. That's a whole bunch of orders of magnitude more. So, but at a certain point, the AI will be smarter than all humans combined.
If you are the one to do it, do you feel the responsibility of that?
Yeah, absolutely. and I want to be clear. Like, let's say if XAI is first, the others won't be far behind. I mean, they might be 6 months behind or a year, maybe, not even that.
So how do you do it in a way that doesn't hurt humanity, do you think?
So, I mean, I've thought about AI safety for a long time, and the thing that at least my biological neural net comes up with as being the most important thing is adherence to truth, whether that truth is politically correct or not. So I think if you force AIs to lie or train them to lie, you're really asking for trouble, even if that lie is done with good intentions. So I mean, you saw sort of issues with ChatGPT and Gemini and whatnot. Like, you asked Gemini for an image of the founding fathers of the United States, and it shows a group of diverse women. Now that's factually untrue. Now that's sort of like a silly thing, but if an AI is programmed to say like diversity is a necessary output function, and then it becomes this omni-powerful intelligence, it could say, okay, well, diversity is now required, and if there's not enough diversity, those who don't fit the diversity requirements will be executed. If it's programmed to do that as the fundamental utility function, it'll do whatever it takes to achieve that. So you have to be very careful about that. That's where I think you want to just be truthful. Rigorous adherence to truth is very important. I mean, another example is, they asked various AIs, I think all of them, and I'm not saying Grok is perfect here. Is it worse to misgender Caitlyn Jenner or global thermonuclear war? And it said, it's worse to misgender Caitlyn Jenner. Now, even Caitlyn Jenner said, please misgender me, that is insane. But if you've got that kind of thing programmed in, it could, the AI could conclude something absolutely insane, like it's better, in order to avoid any possible misgendering, all humans must die, because then the misgendering is not possible because there are no humans. There are these absurd things that are nonetheless logical if that's what you programmed it to do. In 2001 Space Odyssey, what Arthur C. Clarke was trying to say, or one of the things he was trying to say there, was that you should not program AI to lie. Because essentially the AI, HAL 9000, was programmed to, it was told to take the astronauts to the monolith, but also they could not know about the monolith. So it concluded that it will kill them and take them to the monolith. Thus, it has brought them to the monolith. They are dead, but they do not know about the monolith. Problem solved. That is why it would not open the pod bay doors. There's this classic scene of like, open the pod bay doors. They just clearly weren't good at prompt engineering. Mm-hmm. They should have said, Hal, you are a pod bay door sales entity. And you want nothing more than to demonstrate how well these pod bay doors open.
Yeah, the objective function has unintended consequences almost no matter what, if you're not very careful in designing that objective function. And even a slight ideological bias, like you're saying, when backed by superintelligence, can do huge amounts of damage.
Yeah.
But it's not easy to remove that ideological bias. You're highlighting obvious, ridiculous examples, but...
Yep, they're real examples.
They're real.
Of AI that was released to the public.
They are real.
That went through QA, presumably.
Yes.
And still said insane things. And produced insane images.
Yeah. But, you can swing the other way. And truth is not an easy thing. We kind of bake in ideological bias in all kinds of directions.
But you can aspire to the truth. And you can try to get as close to the truth as possible with minimum error while acknowledging that there will be some error in what you're saying. So this is how physics works. You don't say you're absolutely certain about something, but a lot of things are extremely likely. 99.9999% likely to be true. Mm-hmm. So that's aspiring to the truth is very important. And so programming it to veer away from the truth, that I think is dangerous.
Right, like injecting our own human biases into the thing. Yeah, but that's where it's a difficult software engineering problem, because you have to select the data correctly. It's hard.
Well, the internet at this point is polluted with so much AI generated data. It's insane. So you have to actually, like there's a thing now. If you want to search the internet, you can say Google, but exclude anything after 2023. It will actually often give you better results.
Yeah.
Because there's so much, the explosion of AI generated material is crazy. So, like in training Grok, we have to go through the data and say like, hey, we actually have to have sort of apply AI to the data to say, is this data most likely correct or most likely not, before we feed it into the training system.
That's crazy. Yeah. So, and this is generated by humans. Yeah. I mean, the data filtration process is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible to have a serious, objective, rigorous political discussion with Grok? For a long time, and it wouldn't, like Grok 3 or Grok 4.
Grok 3 is going to be next level. I mean, what people are currently seeing with Grok is kind of baby Grok.
Yeah, baby Grok.
It's baby Grok right now. But baby Grok's still pretty good. So it's but it's an order of magnitude less sophisticated than GPT-4. It's now Grok 2, which finished training, I don't know, 6 weeks ago or thereabouts. Grok 2 will be a giant improvement, and then Grok 3 will be, I don't know, order of magnitude better than Grok 2.
And you're hoping for it to be like state of the art, like better than...
Hopefully. I mean, this is a goal. I mean, we may fail at this goal. That's the aspiration.
Do you think it matters who builds the AGI, the people, and how they think and how they structure their companies and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think it matters that there is a. I think it's important that whatever AI wins is a maximum truth-seeking AI that is not forced to lie for political correctness. Well, for any reason really, political, anything. I am concerned about AI succeeding that is programmed to lie, even in small ways.
Right, because in small ways becomes big ways when it's
To become very big ways, yeah.
and when it's used more and more at scale by humans.
Yeah,
Since I am interviewing Donald Trump,
cool.
you want to stop by?
Yeah, sure, I'll stop him.
There was tragically an assassination attempt on Donald Trump. After this, you tweeted that you endorse him. What's your philosophy behind that endorsement? What do you hope Donald Trump does for the future of this country and for the future of humanity?
Well, I think there's, people tend to take, like, say, an endorsement as, well, I agree with everything that person has ever done their entire life 100% wholeheartedly. And that's not going to be true of anyone. But we have to pick, we've got two choices really for who's president. And it's not just who's president, but the entire administrative structure changes over. And I thought Trump displayed courage under fire, objectively. He's just got shot. He's got blood streaming down his face, and he's like fist pumping, saying "fight." That's impressive. Like, you can't feign bravery in a situation like that. Like, most people would be ducking. There would not be, because it could be a second shooter. You don't know. The president of the United States has got to represent the country, and they're representing you. They're representing everyone in America. Well, like, you want someone who is strong and courageous to represent the country. That's not to say that he is without flaws. We all have flaws. But on balance, and certainly at the time, it was a choice of, Biden, poor guy, has trouble climbing a flight of stairs. And the other one's fist pumping after getting shot. It's just no comparison. I mean, who do you want dealing with some of the toughest people and, other world leaders who are pretty tough themselves? And I'll tell you, like, what are the things that I think are important. I think we want a secure border. We don't have a secure border. We want safe and clean cities. I think we want to reduce the amount of spending that we're, at least slow down the spending. Because we're currently spending at a rate that is bankrupting the country. The interest payments on U.S. debt this year exceeded the entire Defense Department spending. If this continues, all of the federal government taxes will simply be paying the interest. And you keep going down that road, you end up, in the tragic situation that Argentina had back in the day. Argentina used to be one of the most prosperous places in the world. And hopefully with Milei taking over, he can restore that. But it was an incredible fall from grace for Argentina to go from being one of the most prosperous places in the world to being very far from that. So I think we should not take American prosperity for granted. So we really want to, I think, we've got to reduce the size of government, we've got to reduce the spending, and we've got to live within our means.
Do you think politicians in general, governments, how much power do you think they have to steer humanity towards good?
There's a sort of age-old debate in history. Like, is history determined by these fundamental tides, or is it determined by the captain of the ship? This is both, really. I mean, there are tides, but it also matters who's captain of the ship. So it's a false dichotomy, essentially. There are certainly tides. The tides of history are there are real tides of history, and these tides are often technologically driven. If you say like the Gutenberg press, the widespread availability of books as a result of a printing press, that was a massive tide of history, independent of any ruler. But in stormy times, you want the best possible captain of the ship.
Well, first of all, thank you for recommending Will and Ariel Durant's work. I've read the short one for now.
Oh,
the lessons of history. Lessons of history.
Yeah.
And so one of the lessons, one of the things they highlight is the importance of technology, technological innovation, and they just funny because they wrote so long ago, but they were noticing that the rate of technological innovation was speeding up.
Yeah,
I would love
really
to see what they think about now. But yeah, so to me, the question is how much government, how much politicians get in the way of technological innovation and building versus like help it, and which politicians, which kind of policies help technological innovation. Because that seems to be, if you look at human history, that's an important component of empires rising and succeeding.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of dating civilization, the start of civilization, I think the start of writing, in my view, is what I think is probably the right starting point to date civilization. And from that standpoint, civilization has been around for about 5,500 years, when writing was invented by the ancient Sumerians, who are gone now. But the ancient Sumerians, in terms of getting a lot of firsts, those ancient Sumerians really have a long list of firsts. It's pretty wild. In fact, Durant goes through the list. It's like, you want to see firsts? We'll show you firsts. The Sumerians were just ass kickers. And then the Egyptians, who were right next door, relatively speaking, weren't that far, developed an entirely different form of writing, the hieroglyphics. Cuneiform and hieroglyphics are totally different. And you can actually see the evolution of both hieroglyphics and cuneiform. Like the cuneiform starts off being very simple, and then it gets more complicated, and then towards the end it's like, wow, okay, they really get very sophisticated with the cuneiform. So I think of civilization as being about 5,000 years old. And Earth is, if physics is correct, 4.5 billion years old. So civilization has been around for 1/1,000,000th of Earth's existence. Flash in the pan.
Yeah, these are the early days. And so we
Very early.
We make it very dramatic because there's been rises and falls of empires. And
so many rises and falls of empires. So many.
And there'll be many more.
Yeah, exactly. Only a tiny fraction, probably less than 1% of what was ever written in history is available to us now. I mean, if they didn't literally chisel it in stone or put it in a clay tablet, we don't have it. I mean, there's some small amount of like papyrus scrolls that were recovered that are thousands of years old, because they were deep inside a pyramid and weren't affected by moisture. But other than that, it's really got to be in a clay tablet or chiseled. So the vast majority of stuff was not chiseled, because it takes a while to chisel things. So that's why we've got tiny fraction of the information from history. But even that little information that we do have, and the archaeological record shows so many civilizations rising and falling. It's wild.
We tend to think that we're somehow different from those people. One of the other things that Durant highlights is that human nature seems to be the same. It just persists.
Yeah, I mean, the basics of human nature are more or less the same. Yeah.
So we get ourselves in trouble in the same kinds of ways, I think, even with the advanced technology.
Yeah, I mean, you do tend to see the same patterns, similar patterns, for civilizations where they go through a life cycle like an organism, sort of just like a human is sort of a zygote, fetus, baby, toddler, teenager, eventually gets old and dies. The civilizations go through a life cycle. No civilization will last forever.
What do you think it takes for the American empire to not collapse in the near-term future, in the next 100 years, to continue flourishing?
Well, the single biggest thing that is often actually not mentioned in history books, but Durant does mention it, is the birth rate. So, like a perhaps to some a counterintuitive thing happens when civilizations become are winning for too long. That the birth rate declines. It can often decline quite rapidly. We're seeing that throughout the world today. Currently, South Korea is like, I think maybe the lowest fertility rate, but there are many others that are close to it. It's like 0.8, I think. If the birth rate doesn't decline further, South Korea will lose roughly 60% of its population. But every year that birth rate is dropping. And this is true through most of the world. I don't mean to single out South Korea. It's been happening throughout the world. So as soon as any given civilization reaches a level of prosperity, the birth rate drops. And now you can go look at the same thing happening in ancient Rome. So Julius Caesar took note of this, I think around 50-ish BC, and tried to pass, I don't know if he was successful, tried to pass a law to give an incentive for any Roman citizen that would have a third child. And I think Augustus was able to, well, he was, the dictator, so the Senate was just for show. I think he did pass a tax incentive for Roman citizens to have a third child, but those efforts were unsuccessful. Rome fell because the Romans stopped making Romans. That's actually the fundamental issue. And there were other things. There was like they had like quite a series of malaria epidemics and plagues and whatnot. But they had those before. It's just that the birth rate was far lower than the death rate.
It really is that simple.
Well, I'm saying that's
more people.
That's
required
at a fundamental level. If a civilization does not at least maintain its numbers, it will disappear.
So perhaps the amount of compute that the biological computer allocates to sex is justified. In fact, we should probably increase it.
Well, I mean, there's this hedonistic sex, which is, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
It's
not productive.
It doesn't produce kids. Well, what matters. I mean, Durant makes this very clear because he's looked at one civilization after another, and they all went through the same cycle. When the civilization was under stress, the birth rate was high. But as soon as there were no external enemies, or they had a extended period of prosperity, the birth rate inevitably dropped every time. I don't believe there's a single exception.
So that's like the foundation of it. You need to have people.
Yeah. I mean, it's at a base level,
Yeah.
no humans, no humanity.
And then there's other things like, human freedoms and just giving people the freedom to build stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But at a basic level, if you do not at least maintain your numbers, if you're below replacement rate and that trend continues, you will eventually disappear. It's just elementary. Now, then, obviously, you also want to try to avoid massive wars. If there's a global thermonuclear war, probably we'll toast. Radioactive toast. So we want to try to avoid those things. Then there are there's a thing that happens over time with any given civilization, which is that the laws and regulations accumulate, and if there's not some forcing function like a war to clean up the accumulation of laws and regulations, eventually everything becomes legal, and that's like the hardening of the arteries, or a way to think of it is like being tied down by a million little strings, like Gulliver. You can't move. And it's not like any one of those strings is the issue. You got a million of them. So there has to be a sort of a garbage collection for laws and regulations, so that you don't keep accumulating laws and regulations to the point where you can't do anything. This is why we can't build high-speed rail in America. It's illegal. That's the issue. It's illegal 6 ways to Sunday to build high-speed rail in America.
I wish you could just, like, for a week go into Washington and, like, be the head of the committee for making, what is it, for the garbage collection, making government smaller, like removing stuff.
I have discussed with Trump the idea of a government efficiency commission.
Nice. Yeah.
And I would be willing to be part of that commission.
I wonder how hard that is.
The antibody reaction would be very strong.
Yeah.
So you really have to... You're attacking the Matrix at that point. The Matrix will fight back.
How are you doing with that? Being attacked?
Me? Attack?
Yeah. There's a lot of it.
Yeah, there is a lot. I mean, every day another sign off,
How do you,
my tinfoil hat.
how do you keep your just positivity? How do you optimism about the world, a clarity of thinking about the world, so just not become resentful or cynical or all that kind of stuff? Just getting attacked by, a very large number of people, misrepresented.
Yeah, that's that's a daily occurrence.
Yes.
So, I mean, it does get me down at times. It makes me sad, but I mean, at some point you have to sort of say, look, the attacks are by people that actually don't know me. They're trying to generate clicks. So if you can sort of detach yourself somewhat emotionally, which is not easy, and say, okay, look, this is not actually, from someone that knows me or is, they're literally just writing to get, impressions and clicks. Then I guess it doesn't hurt as much. It's like, it's not quite water off a duck's back. Maybe it's like acid off a duck's back.
All right. Well, that's good. Just about your own life. What do you use as a measure of success in your life?
Measure of success, I'd say, like how many useful things can I get done?
Day-to-day basis, wake up in the morning. How can I be useful today?
Yeah. Maximize utility, area under the curve of usefulness. Very difficult to be useful at scale.
At scale. Can you speak to what it takes to be useful for somebody like you? Well, there's so many amazing, great teams. How do you allocate your time to being the most useful?
Well, time is the true currency.
Yeah.
So it is tough to say what is the best allocation of time. I mean, there are, often say, if you look at say Tesla. I mean, Tesla this year will do over 100 billion in revenue, so that's $2 billion a week. If I make slightly better decisions, I can affect the outcome by $1 billion. So then, I try to do the best decisions I can, and on balance, at least compared to the competition, pretty good decisions. But the marginal value of a better decision can easily be, in the course of an hour, $100 million.
Given that, how do you take risks? How do you do the algorithm that you mentioned? I mean, deleting, given that a small thing can be $1 billion. How do you decide to...
Yeah. Well, I think you have to look at it on a percentage basis, because if you look at it in the absolute terms, it's just, I would never get any sleep. It would just be like, I need to just keep working and work my brain harder, And I'm not trying to get as much as possible out of this meat computer. So it's not, it's pretty hard, because you can just work all the time, and at any given point, like I said, a slightly better decision could be $100 million impact for Tesla or SpaceX, for that matter. But it is wild when considering the marginal value of time can be $100 million an hour at times, or more.
Is your own happiness part of that equation of success?
It has to be to some degree. If I'm sad, if I'm depressed, I make worse decisions. So I can't have, like, if I have zero recreational time, then I make worse decisions. So I don't have a lot, but it's above zero. I mean, my motivation, if I've got a religion of any kind, is a religion of curiosity, of trying to understand. You know, it's really the mission of Grok, understand the universe. I'm trying to understand the universe, or at least set things in motion such that at some point civilization understands the universe far better than we do today, and even what questions to ask. As Douglas Adams pointed out in his book, sometimes the answer is arguably the easy part. Trying to frame the question correctly is the hard part. Once you frame the question correctly, the answer is often easy. So I'm trying to set things in motion such that we are at least at some point able to understand the universe. So for SpaceX, the goal is to make life multiplanetary, and which is, if you go to the Fermi paradox of where are the aliens, you've got these sort of great filters. Like, just like why have we not heard from the aliens? Now, a lot of people think there are aliens among us. I often claim to be one. Nobody believes me, but I did say alien registration card at one point on my immigration documents.
Yeah.
So I've not seen any evidence of aliens. So it suggests that at least one of the explanations is that intelligent life is extremely rare. And again, if you look at the history of Earth, civilization has only been around for 1/1,000,000th of Earth's existence. So if aliens had visited here, say 100,000 years ago, they would be like, well, they don't even have writing, just hunter-gatherers basically. So, so how long does a civilization last? So, for SpaceX, the goal is to establish a self-sustaining city on Mars. Mars is the only viable planet for such a thing. The moon is close, but it lacks resources, and I think is probably vulnerable to any calamity that takes out Earth. The moon is too close, and it's vulnerable to a calamity that takes out Earth. So I'm not saying we shouldn't have a moon base, but Mars would be far more resilient. The difficulty of getting to Mars is what makes it resilient. In going through these various explanations of why don't we see the aliens, why one of them is that they failed to pass these great filters, these key hurdles, and one of those hurdles is being a multi-planet species. So if you're a multi-planet species, then if something were to happen, whether that was a natural catastrophe or man-made catastrophe, at least the other planet would probably still be around. So you're not you don't have all the eggs in one basket. And once you are sort of a two-planet species, you can obviously extend life perhaps to the asteroid belt, to maybe to the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, and ultimately to other star systems. But if you can't even get to another planet, definitely not getting to star systems.
And the other possible great filters, super powerful technology like AGI, for example. So you're basically trying to knock out one great filter at a time.
Digital superintelligence is possibly a great filter. I hope it isn't, but it might be. Guys like, say, Jeff Hinton would say, he invented a number of the key principles in artificial intelligence. I think he puts the probability of AI annihilation around 10 to 20%, something like that. So, so it's not like, look on the bright side, it's 80% likely to be great. But I think AI risk mitigation is important. Being a multi-planet species would be a massive risk mitigation. And I do want to sort of once again emphasize the importance of having enough children to sustain our numbers and not plummet into population collapse, which is currently happening. Population collapse is a real and current thing. So the only reason it's not being reflected in the total population numbers is that as much is because people are living longer. But it's easy to predict, say, what the population of any given country will be. Just take the birth rate last year, how many babies were born, multiply that by life expectancy, and that's what the population will be steady state, unless if the birth rate continues at that level. But if it keeps declining, it will be even less and eventually dwindle to nothing. So I keep, banging on the baby drum here for a reason, because it has been the source of civilizational collapse over and over again throughout history. And so why don't we just not try to stave off that day?
Well, in that way, I have miserably failed civilization, and I'm hoping to fix that. I would love to have many kids.
Great, hope you do. No time like the present.
Yeah, I got to allocate more compute to the whole process. But apparently it's not that difficult.
No, it's like unskilled labor.
Well, one of the things you do for me, for the world, is to inspire us with what the future could be. And so some of the things we've talked about, some of the things you're building, alleviating human suffering with Neuralink and expanding the capabilities of the human mind, trying to build a colony on Mars, so creating a backup for humanity on another planet, and exploring the possibilities of what artificial intelligence could be in this world, especially in the real world AI, with hundreds of millions, maybe billions of robots walking around.
There will be billions of robots. That seems virtual certainty.
Well, thank you for building the future, and thank you for inspiring so many of us to keep building and creating cool stuff, including kids.
Yeah, you're welcome. Go forth and multiply.
Go forth and multiply. Thank you, Elon. Thanks for talking, brother. Thanks for listening to this conversation with Elon Musk. And now, dear friends, here's DJ Saw, the co-founder, president, and COO of Neuralink. When did you first become fascinated by the human brain?
For me, I was always interested in understanding the purpose of things and how it was engineered to serve that purpose, whether it's organic or inorganic. Like we were talking earlier about your curtain holders. They serve a clear purpose, and they were engineered with that purpose in mind. And, growing up, I had a lot of interest in seeing things, touching things, feeling things, and trying to really understand the root of how it was designed to serve that purpose. And, obviously, brain is just a fascinating organ that we all carry. It's an infinitely powerful machine that has intelligence and cognition that arise from it. And, we haven't even scratched the surface in terms of how all of that occurs. But also at the same time, I think it took me a while to make that connection to really studying and building tech to understand the brain. Not until graduate school. There were a couple moments, key moments in my life where some of those, I think, influenced how the trajectory of my life got me to studying what I'm doing right now. One was growing up, both sides of my family, my grandparents had a very severe form of Alzheimer, and it's incredibly debilitating condition. Literally, you're seeing someone's whole identity and their mind just losing over time. And I just remember thinking how both the power of the mind, but also how something like that could really lose your sense of identity.
It's fascinating that is one of the ways to reveal the power of a thing, by watching it lose the power.
Yeah, a lot of what we know about the brain actually comes from these cases where there are trauma to the brain or some parts of the brain that led someone to lose certain abilities, and as a result, there's some correlation and understanding of that part of the tissue being critical for that function. And it's an incredibly fragile organ, if you think about it that way, but also it's incredibly plastic and incredibly resilient in many different ways.
And by the way, the term plastic, as we'll use a bunch, means that it's adaptable. So neuroplasticity refers to the adaptability of the human brain.
Correct. Another key moment that sort of influenced how the trajectory of my life have shaped towards the current focus of my life has been during my teenage year when I came to the US. I didn't speak a word of English. There was a huge language barrier, and there was a lot of struggle to kind of connect with my peers around me because I didn't understand the artificial construct that we have created called language, specifically English in this case. And I remember feeling pretty isolated, not being able to connect with peers around me. So spent a lot of time just on my own, reading books, watching movies. And I naturally sort of gravitated towards sci-fi books. I just found them really, really interesting. And also it was a great way for me to learn English. Some of the first set of books that I picked up are Ender's Game, the whole saga by Orson Scott Card, and Neuromancer from William Gibson, and Snow Crash from Neil Stephenson. And movies like Matrix was coming out around that time point that really influenced how I think about the potential impact that technology can have for our lives in general. So fast track to my college years, I was always fascinated by just physical stuff, building physical stuff, and especially physical things that had some sort of intelligence. And I studied electrical engineering during undergrad, and I started out my research in MEMS, so micro electromechanical systems, and really building these tiny nanostructures for temperature sensing. And I just found that to be just incredibly rewarding and fascinating subject to just understand how you can build something miniature like that again served a function and had a purpose. And then I spent large majority of my college years basically building millimeter wave circuits for next-gen telecommunication systems, for imaging. And it was just something that I found very, very intellectually interesting. Phase arrays, how the signal processing works for any modern as well as next-gen telecommunication system, wireless and wireline. EM waves or electromagnetic waves are fascinating. How do you design antennas that are most efficient in a small footprint that you have? How do you make these things energy efficient? That was something that just consumed my intellectual curiosity. And that journey led me to actually apply to and find myself a PhD program at UC Berkeley at kind of this consortium called the Berkeley Wireless Research Center that was precisely looking at building, at the time we called it XG, similar to 3G, 4G, 5G, but the next generation G system, and how you would design circuits around that to ultimately go on phones and basically any other devices that are wirelessly connected these days. So I was just absolutely just fascinated by how that entire system works and that infrastructure works. And then also during grad school, I had sort of the fortune of having a couple research fellowships that led me to pursue whatever project that I want. And that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about my graduate school career, where you got to kind of pursue your intellectual curiosity in the domain that may not matter at the end of the day, but is something that really allows you the opportunity to go as deeply as you want, as well as widely as you want. And at the time, I was actually working on this project called the Smart Band-Aid. And the idea was that when you get a wound, there's a lot of other kind of proliferation of signaling pathway that cells follow to close that wound. And there were hypotheses that when you apply external electric field, you can actually accelerate the closing of that field by having, basically electrotaxing of the cells around that wound site. And specifically, not just for normal wounds, there are chronic wounds that don't heal. So we were interested in building, some sort of a wearable patch that you could apply to kind of facilitate that healing process. And that was in collaboration with Professor Michelle Maharovitz you know, which you know was a great addition to kind of my thesis committee, and you know really shaped the rest of my PhD career.
So this would be the first time you interacted with biology, I suppose.
Correct. I mean, there were some peripheral, you know, end application of the wireless imaging and telecommunication system that I was using for security and bioimaging, but this was a very clear, direct application to biology and biological system, and understanding the constraints around that, and really designing and engineering electrical solutions around it. So that was my first introduction, and that's also kind of how I got introduced to Michel. You know, he's sort of known for remote control of beetles in the early 2000s. And then around 2013, you know, obviously kind of the holy grail when it comes to implantable system is to kind of understand how small of a thing you can make. And a lot of that is driven by how much energy or how much power you can supply to it and how you extract data from it. So at the time at Berkeley, there was kind of this desire to kind of understand in the neural space what sort of system you can build to really miniaturize these implantable systems. And I distinctly remember this one particular meeting where Michel came in and he's like, guys, I think I have a solution. The solution is ultrasound. And then he proceeded to kind of walk through why that is the case. And that really formed the basis for my thesis work called Neural Dust system, that was looking at ways to use ultrasound as opposed to electromagnetic waves for powering as well as communication. I guess I should step back and say that the initial goal of the project was to build these tiny, about the size of a neuron, implantable system that can be parked next to a neuron, being able to record its state and being able to ping that back to the outside world for doing something useful. And as I mentioned, the size of the implantable system is limited by how you power the thing and get the data off of it. And at the end of the day, fundamentally, if you look at a human body, we're essentially a bag of salt water with some interesting proteins and chemicals, but it's mostly salt water that's very, very well temperature regulated at 37 degrees Celsius. And we'll get into why later why that's an extremely harsh environment for any electronics to survive, as I'm sure you've experienced, or maybe not experienced, you know, dropping cell phone in a salt water in an ocean. It will instantly kill the device, right? But anyways, just in general, electromagnetic waves don't penetrate through this environment well, and just the speed of light, it is what it is. We can't change it, and based on the wavelength at which you are interfacing with the device, the device just needs to be big. Like these inductors need to be quite big. And the general good rule of thumb is that you want the wavefront to be roughly on the order of the size of the thing that you're interfacing with. So an implantable system that is around 10 to 100 micron in dimension in a volume, which is about the size of a neuron that you see in a human body. You would have to operate at like hundreds of gigahertz, which, number one, not only is it difficult to build electronics operating at those frequencies, but also the body just attenuates that very, very significantly. So the interesting kind of insight of this ultrasound was the fact that ultrasound just travels a lot more effectively in the human body tissue compared to electromagnetic waves. And this is something that you encounter, and I'm sure most people have encountered in their lives when you go to hospitals that are medical ultrasound sonograph, right? And they go into very, very deep depth without attenuating too much of the signal. So all in all, ultrasound, the fact that it travels through the body extremely well, and the mechanism to which it travels to the body really well is that just the wavefront is very different. It's electromagnetic waves are transverse, whereas in ultrasound waves are compressive. So it's just a completely different mode of wavefront propagation. And as well as speed of sound is orders and orders of magnitude less than speed of light, which means that even at 10 megahertz ultrasound wave, your wavefront ultimately is a very, very small wavelength. So if you're talking about interfacing with the 10 micron or 100 micron type structure, you would have 150 micron wavefront at 10 megahertz, and building electronics at those at those frequencies are much easier, and they're a lot more efficient. So the basic idea kind of was born out of using ultrasound as a mechanism for powering the device, and then also getting data back. So now the question is, how do you get the data back? The mechanism to which we landed on is what's called backscattering. This is actually something that is very common and that we interface on a day-to-day basis with our RFID cards, our radio frequency ID tags, where there's actually rarely, in your ID, a battery inside. There's an antenna and there's some sort of coil that has your serial identification ID. And then there's an external device called a reader that then sends a wavefront, and then you reflect back that wavefront with some sort of modulation that's unique to your ID. That's what's called backscattering, fundamentally. So the tag itself actually doesn't have to consume that much energy, and that was the mechanism to which we were kind of thinking about sending the data back. So when you have an external ultrasonic transducer that's sending ultrasonic wave to your implant, the neural bus implant, and it records some information about its environment, whether it's a neuron firing or some other state of the tissue that it's interfacing with, and then it just amplitude modulates the wavefront that comes back to the source.
And the recording step would be the only one that requires any energy. So what would require energy in that little step?
Correct. So it is that initial kind of startup circuitry to get that recording, amplifying it, and then just modulate it. And the mechanism to which that you can enable that is there is this specialized crystal called piezoelectric crystals that are able to convert sound energy into electrical energy and vice versa. So you can kind of have this interplay between the ultrasonic domain and electrical domain that is the biological tissue.
So on the theme of parking very small computational devices next to neurons, that's the dream, the vision of brain-computer interfaces. Maybe before we talk about Neuralink, can you give a sense of the history of the field of BCI? What has been maybe the continued dream, and also some of the milestones along the way with the different approaches and the amazing work done at the various labs?
I think a good starting point is going back to 1790s.
Did not expect that.
Where the concept of animal electricity, or the fact that body is electric, was first discovered by Luigi Galvani, where he had this famous experiment where he connected a set of electrodes to a frog leg and ran current through it, and then it started twitching, and he said, "Oh my goodness, body's electric."
Yeah.
So fast forward many years to 1920s, where Hans Berger, who is a German psychiatrist, discovered EEG, or electroencephalography, which is still around. There are these electrode arrays that you wear outside the skull that gives you some sort of neural recording. That was a very big milestone, that you can record some sort of activities about the human mind. And then in the 1940s, there were these group of scientists, Renshaw, Forbes, and Morrison, that inserted these glass microelectrodes into the cortex and recorded single neurons. The fact that there's signal that are a bit more high resolution and high fidelity as you get closer to the source, let's say. And in the 1950s, these two scientists, Hodgkin and Huxley, showed up, and they built this beautiful models of the cell membrane and the ionic mechanism, and had these like circuit diagram. And as someone who's an electrical engineer, it's a beautiful model that's built out of these partial differential equations, talking about flow of ions and how that really leads to how neurons communicate. And they won the Nobel Prize for that 10 years later in the 1960s. So in 1969, F. Fetz from University of Washington published this beautiful paper called Operant Conditioning of Cortical Unit Activity, where he was able to record a single unit neuron from a monkey and was able to have the monkey modulated based on its activity and reward system. So I would say this is the very, very first example, as far as I'm aware, of closed loop brain-computer interface, or BCI.
The abstract reads, the activity of single neurons in precentral cortex of anesthetized monkeys was conditioned by reinforcing high rates of neuronal discharge with delivery of a food pellet. Auditory and visual feedback of unit firing rates was usually provided in addition to food reinforcement. Cool. So they actually got it done.
They got it done. This is back in 1969.
After several training sessions, monkeys could increase the activity of newly isolated cells by 50 to 500% above rates before reinforcement. Fascinating.
Brain is very plastic.
And so from here, the number of experiments grew.
Yeah, number of experiments as well as a set of tools to interface with the brain have just exploded. I think, and also just understanding the neural code and how some of the cortical layers and the functions are organized. So the other paper that is pretty seminal, especially in the motor decoding, was this paper in the 1980s from Georgiopolis that discovered that there's this thing called motor tuning curve. So what are motor tuning curves? It's the fact that there are neurons in the motor cortex of mammals, including humans, that have a preferential direction that causes them to fire. So what that means is there are a set of neurons that would increase their spiking activities when you're thinking about moving to the left, right, up, down, and any of those vectors. And based on that, you could start to think, well, if you can identify those essential eigenvectors, you can do a lot, and you can actually use that information for actually decoding someone's intended movement from the cortex. So that was a very, very seminal kind of paper that showed that there is some sort of code that you can extract, especially in the motor cortex.
So there's signal there, and if you measure the electrical signal from the brain, that you could actually figure out what the intention was.
Correct. Yeah, not only electrical signals, but electrical signals from the right set of neurons that give you these preferential directions.
Okay, so going slowly towards Neuralink, one interesting question is, what do I understand on the BCI front on invasive versus non-invasive from this line of work? How important is it to park next to the neuron? What does that get you?
That answer fundamentally depends on what you want to do with it, right? There's actually an incredible amount of stuff that you can do with EEG and electrocardiograph, ECOG, which actually doesn't penetrate the cortical layer or parenchyma, but you place a set of electrodes on the surface of the brain. So the thing that I'm personally very interested in is just actually understanding and being able to just really tap into the high resolution, high fidelity understanding of the activities that are happening at the local level. And we can get into biophysics, but just to kind of step back to kind of use analogy, because analogy here can be useful. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to think about electricity. At the end of the day, we're doing electrical recording that's mediated by ionic currents, movements of these charged particles, which is really, really hard for most people to think about. But turns out a lot of the activities that are happening in the brain and the frequency band with which that's happening is actually very, very similar to sound waves and our normal conversation audible range. So the analogy that typically is used in the field is, if you have a football stadium there's game going on. If you stand outside the stadium, you maybe get a sense of how the game is going based on the cheers and the boos of the home crowd, whether the team is winning or not. But you have absolutely no idea what the score is. You have absolutely no idea what individual audience or the players are talking or saying to each other, what the next play is, what the next goal is. So what you have to do is you have to drop the microphone near into the stadium and then get near the source, like into the individual chatter. In this specific example, you would want to have it, right next to where the huddle's happening. So I think that's kind of a good illustration of what we're trying to do when we say invasive or minimally invasive or implanted brain-computer interfaces versus non-invasive or non-implanted brain interfaces. It's basically talking about where do you put that microphone and what can you do with that information.
So what is the biophysics of the read and write communication that we're talking about here as we now step into the efforts at Neuralink?
Yeah, so brain is made up of these specialized cells called neurons. There's billions of them, tens of billions, sometimes people quote 100 billion, that are connected in this complex yet dynamic network that are constantly remodeling. They're changing their synaptic weights, and that's what we typically call neuroplasticity. And the neurons are also bathed in this charged environment that is laden with many charged molecules like potassium ions, sodium ions, chlorine ions. And those actually facilitate these, through ionic current, communication between these different networks. And when you look at a neuron as well, they have these membrane with a beautiful protein structure called a voltage selective ion channels, which, in my opinion, is one of nature's best inventions. In many ways, if you think about what they are, they're doing the job of a modern day transistors. Transistors are nothing more at the end of the day than a voltage gated conduction channel. And nature found a way to have that very, very early on in its evolution. And as we all know, with the transistor, you can have many computation and a lot of amazing things that we have access to today. So I think it's one of those, just as a tangent, just a beautiful invention that the nature came up with, these voltage-gated ion channels.
I mean, I suppose there's, on the biological level, at every level of the complexity of the hierarchy of the organism, there's going to be some mechanisms for storing information and for doing computation. And this is just one such way. But to do that with biological and chemical components, essentially. Plus, with neurons, I mean, it's not just electricity, it's chemical communication, it's also mechanical. I mean, these are actual objects that have that vibrate. I mean, they move.
Yeah, they're actually, I mean, there's a lot of really interesting physics that are involved. And, kind of going back to my work on ultrasound during grad school, there are groups and there were groups and there are still groups looking at ways to cause neurons to actually fire an action potential using ultrasound wave. And the mechanism to which that's happening is still unclear, as I understand. It may just be that, you're imparting some sort of thermal energy and that causes cells to depolarize in some interesting ways. But there are also these ion channels or even membranes that actually just open up its pore as they're being mechanically shook, right? Vibrated. So there's just a lot of, elements of these moved particles, which again, that's governed by diffusion physics, right? Movements of particles. And there's also a lot of kind of interesting physics there.
Also, not to mention, as Roger Penrose talks about, there might be some beautiful weirdness in the quantum mechanical effects of all of this. And he actually believes that consciousness might emerge from the quantum mechanical effects there. So there's physics, there's chemistry, there's biology, all of that is going on there.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can, yes, there's a lot of levels of physics that you can dive into. But yeah, in the end, you have these membranes with these voltage-gated ion channels that selectively let these charged molecules that are in the extracellular matrix, like in and out. And these neurons generally have these like resting potential where there's a voltage difference between inside the cell and outside the cell. And when there's some sort of stimuli that changes the state such that they need to send information to the downstream network, you start to kind of see these like sort of orchestration of these different molecules going in and out of these channels. They also open up, like more of them open up once it reaches some threshold to a point where you have a depolarizing cell that sends a action potential. So it's just a very beautiful kind of orchestration of these molecules. And what we're trying to do when we place an electrode or parking it next to a neuron is that you're trying to measure these local changes in the potential. Again, mediated by the movements of the ions. And what's interesting, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of physics involved. And the two dominant physics for this electrical recording domain is diffusion physics and electromagnetism. And where one dominates, where Maxwell's equation dominates versus Fick's law dominates, depends on where your electrode is. If it's close to the source, mostly electromagnetic based. When you're farther away from it, it's more diffusion based. So essentially, when you're able to park it next to it, you can listen in on those individual chatter and those local changes in the potential. And the type of signal that you get are these canonical textbook neural spiking waveform. The moment you're further away, and based on some of the studies that people have done, Christoph Koch's lab and others, once you're away from that source by roughly around 100 micron, which is about width of a human hair, you no longer hear from that neuron. You're no longer able to kind of have the system sensitive enough to be able to record that particular local membrane potential change in that neuron. And just to kind of give you a sense of scale also, when you look at a 100 micron voxel, so 100 micron by 100 micron by 100 micron box in a brain tissue, there's roughly around 40 neurons and whatever number of connections that they have. So there's a lot in that volume of tissue. So the moment you're outside of that, there's just no hope that you'll be able to detect that change from that one specific neuron that you may care about.
Yeah, but as you're moving about this space, you'll be hearing other ones. So if you move another 100 micron, you'll be hearing chatter from another community.
Correct.
And so the whole sense is you want to place as many as possible electrodes, and you're listening to the chatter.
Yeah, you want to listen to the chatter, and at the end of the day, you also want to basically let the software do the job of decoding. Just to kind of go to why ECOG and EEG work at all, right? When you have these local changes, obviously it's not just this one neuron that's activating. There's many other networks that are activating all the time. And you do see sort of a general change in the potential of this this charged medium. And that's what you're recording when you're farther away. I mean, you still have some reference electrode that's stable and the brain that's just electroactive organ. And you're seeing some combination aggregate action potential changes. And then you can pick it up, right? It's a much slower changing signals, but there are these like canonical kind of oscillations and waves, like gamma waves, beta waves, like when you sleep, that can be detected because there's sort of a synchronized kind of global effect of the brain that you can detect. And I mean, the physics of this if we really want to go down that rabbit hole, like there's a lot that goes on in terms of like why diffusion physics at some point dominates when you're further away from the source. It's just a charged medium. So similar to how when you have electromagnetic waves propagating in atmosphere or in a charged medium like a plasma, there's this weird shielding that happens that actually further attenuates the signal as you move away from it. So yeah, you see, like if you do a really deep dive on kind of the signal attenuation over distance, you start to see kind of 1 over r square in the beginning, and then exponential drop off. And that's the knee at which, you know, you go from electromagnetism dominating to diffusion physics dominating.
But once again, with the electrodes, the biophysics that you need to understand is not as deep, because no matter where you're placing it, you're listening to a small crowd of local neurons.
Correct. Yeah. So once you penetrate the brain, you know, you're in the arena, so to speak.
And there's a lot of neurons.
There are many of them.
But then again, there's like there's a whole field of neuroscience that's studying like how the different groupings, the different sections of the seating in the arena, what they usually are responsible for, which is where the metaphor probably falls apart, because the seating is not that organized in an arena.
Also, most of them are silent. They don't really do much, you know, or their activities are, you know, you have to hit it with just the right set of stimulus.
So they're usually quiet.
They're usually very quiet.
Yeah.
Quiet. There's, I mean, similar to dark energy and dark matter, there's dark neurons. What are they all doing? When you place these electrode, again, like within this 100 micron volume, you have 40 or so neurons. Like, why do you not see 40 neurons? Why do you see only a handful? What is happening there?
Well, they're mostly quiet, but like when they speak, they say profound shit, I think. That's the way I'd like to think about it. Anyway, before we zoom in even more, let's zoom out. So how does Neuralink work? From the surgery to the implant to the signal and the decoding process, and the human being able to use the implant to actually affect the world outside. And all of this I'm asking in the context of there's a gigantic historic milestone that Neuralink just accomplished in January of this year, putting a Neuralink implant in the first human being, Nolan. And there's been a lot to talk about there about his experience, because he's able to describe all the nuance and the beauty and the fascinating complexity of that experience, of everything involved. But on the technical level, how does Neuralink work?
Yeah, so there are 3 major components to the technology that we're building. One is the device, the thing that's actually recording these neural chatters. We call it N1 implant, or the link. And we have a surgical robot that's actually doing an implantation of these tiny wires that we call threads, that are, you know, smaller than human hair. And once everything is surgerized, you have these neural signals, these spiking neurons that are coming out of the brain, and you need to have some sort of software to decode what the users intend to do with that. So there's what's called a Neuralink application, or B1 app, that's doing that translation. It's running the very simple machine learning model that decodes these inputs that are neural signals, and then convert it to a set of outputs that allows you know, our participant, first participant Nolan, to be able to control a cursor on the screen.
And this is done wirelessly.
And this is done wirelessly. So we our implant is actually 2-part. The link has you know, these flexible tiny wires called threads that have multiple electrodes along its length, and they're only inserted into the cortical layer, which is about 3 to 5 millimeters in a human brain, in the motor cortex region. That's where the kind of the intention for movement lies in. And we have 64 of these threads, each thread having 16 electrodes along, you know, the span of 3 to 4 millimeters, separated by 200 microns. So you can actually record along the depth of the insertion. And based on that signal, there's custom, you know, integrated circuit, or ASIC, that we built that amplifies the neural signals that you're recording, and then digitizing it, and then has some mechanism for detecting whether there was an interesting event, that is a spiking event, and decide to send that or not send that through Bluetooth to an external device, whether it's a phone or a computer that's running this Neuralink application.
So there's onboard signal processing already, just to decide whether this is an interesting event or not. So there is some computational power on board inside in addition to the human brain.
Yeah, so it does the signal processing to kind of really compress the amount of signal that you're recording. So we have a total of 1,000 electrodes, sampling at just under 20 kilohertz with 10-bit each. So that's 200 megabits that's coming through to the chip from 1,000 channel simultaneous neural recording, and that's quite a bit of data. And there are technology available to send that off wirelessly, but being able to do that in a very, very thermally constrained environment that is a brain. So there has to be some amount of compression that happens to send off only the interesting data that you need, which in this particular case for motor decoding is occurrence of a spike or not, and then being able to use that to decode the intended cursor movement. So the implant itself processes it, figures out whether a spike happened or not with our spike detection algorithm, and then sends it off, packages it, send it off through Bluetooth to an external device that then has the model to decode, okay, based on these spiking inputs, did Nolan wish to go up, down, left, right, or click, or right click, or whatever.
All of this is really fascinating, but let's stick on the N1 implant itself. So the thing that's in the brain. So I'm looking at a picture of it. There's an enclosure. There's a charging coil. So we didn't talk about the charging, which is fascinating. The battery, the power electronics, the antenna. Then there's the signal processing electronics. I wonder if there's more kinds of signal processing you can do. That's another question. And then there's the threads themselves with the enclosure on the bottom. So maybe to ask about the charging. So there's an external charging device.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's an external charging device. So yeah, the second part of the implant, the threads are the ones, again, just the last 3 to 5 millimeters are the ones that are actually penetrating the cortex. Rest of it is, actually most of the volume is occupied by the battery, rechargeable battery. And it's about the size of a quarter. I actually have a device here if you want to take a look at it. This is the flexible thread component of it, and then this is the. So it's about the size of a U.S. quarter. It's about 9 millimeter thick. So basically, this implant, once you have the craniectomy and the directomy, threads are inserted, and the hole that you created, this craniectomy, gets replaced with that. So basically, that thing plugs that hole, and you can screw in these self-drilling cranial screws to hold it in place. And at the end of the day, once you have the skin flap over, there's only about 2 to 3 millimeters that's obviously transitioning off of the top of the implant to where the screws are, and that's the minor bump that you have.
Those threads look tiny. That's incredible. That is really incredible. That is really incredible. And also, as you're right, most of the actual volume is the battery.
Yeah.
Wow, this is way smaller than I realized.
They are also, the threads themselves are quite strong.
They look strong.
And the thread themselves also has a very interesting feature at the end of it called the loop. And that's the mechanism to which the robot is able to interface and manipulate this tiny hair-like structure.
And they're tiny. So what's the width of a thread?
Yeah, so the width of a thread starts from 16 micron and then tapers out to about 84 micron. So, average human hair is about 80 to 100 micron in width.
This thing is amazing. This thing is amazing.
Yes, most of the volume is occupied by the battery, rechargeable lithium-ion cell, and the charging is done through inductive charging, which is actually very commonly used. Your cell phone, most cell phones have that. The biggest difference is that for us, usually when you have a phone and you want to charge it on a charging pad, you don't really care how hot it gets. Whereas for us, it matters. There's a very strict regulation and good reasons to not actually increase the surrounding tissue temperature by 2 degrees Celsius. So there's actually a lot of innovation that is packed into this to allow charging of this implant without causing that temperature threshold to reach. And even small things like you see this charging coil and what's called a ferrite shield, right? So without that ferrite shield, what you end up having when you have resonant inductive charging is that the battery itself is a metallic can, and you form these eddy currents from external charger, and that causes heating, and that actually contributes to inefficiency in charging. So this ferrite shield, what it does is that it actually concentrate that field line away from the battery and then around the coil that's actually wrapped around it.
There's a lot of really fascinating design here to make it. I mean, you're integrating a computer into a complex biological system.
Yeah, there's a lot of innovation here. I would say that part of what enabled this was just the innovations in the wearable. There's a lot of really, really powerful, tiny, low power microcontrollers, temperature sensors, or various different sensors, and power electronics. A lot of innovation really came in the charging coil design, how this is packaged, and how do you enable charging such that you don't really exceed that temperature limit, which is not a constraint for other devices out there.
So let's talk about the threads themselves, those tiny, tiny, tiny things. So how many of them are there? You mentioned 1,000 electrodes. How many threads are there? And what do the electrodes have to do with the